the status of humans as mortal when they're put into the garden. So Gina, we'll let you articulate this question that a bunch of people asked.
My name is Gina Linden, and I live in Birmingham, Alabama. You pointed out a new thought and great point for me that the tree of life in Genesis 3:22 indicates humans do not possess the ability on their own to live forever. My understanding has been that it is sin that brought on the aging process and the end result, death. Maybe we can only speculate, but I was wondering what you thought would happen to humans if we had never sinned. Would we still age and or die? If we had eaten of that tree first, could we still have eaten from the other and been in a worse position? Thanks, guys.
Yeah, great question. So actually, I did some recent work on this just to kind of nail it down about humans from dust, the meaning of this image, because it's pretty significant. So in other words, the narrative's very clear. When God forms the human, this is in Genesis 2, verse 7, he forms the human before he plants the garden. This is interesting. I'm trying to think back of all the different ways we've depicted this in the past. But in Genesis 2, you get the problem of the uncultivated Adamah. The Adamah doesn't produce anything because there's no human to work the ground. But there was a stream that rose up from the land and watered it. Verse 7, and Yahweh Elohim formed human of dust from the ground. So you get the idea of this wet ground, this wet dust, out in the wilderness, in the realm of non-life. And then from the material of non-life, before there's any garden, he forms human. But then what's interesting, the human is not alive. He's just a lump of clay. It's the breathing into his nostrils of the breath of life. Then you get a nefesh chaya. You get a living being, a living nefesh. And then verse 8, God plants a garden toward the east in Eden. Then he placed there the human that he had formed. So you get this idea that humans are made out of dust, lifeless dust, animated by divine breath, then put into the garden place. Well, I guess here's a question. Is the narrative trying to give us a clue as to the actual substance? Is this video camera footage?
Right.
Or is this an archetypal statement about Adam as a whole, humanity as a whole, outside the garden? When humanity's outside the garden, what is humanity? So one way to ask that question would be, is the imagery of humans made of dust used of people other than Adam in the Bible? And if so, that would give us a clue that this is a statement about human nature, not video camera footage.
Okay.
Does that make sense? How I'm setting up the question? Is this narrative an archetypal statement about humanity in general and humanity's nature?
Well, can we just assume it is?
What, that it's archetypal?
Well,
maybe you and I can, but I know a lot of people who would feel nervous about that, or they would need to be convinced of that.
Sure. Okay.
Let's just do a concordance search about humans from dust.
Humans from dust.
What actually is being claimed here? And what are the implications about human mortality or immortality, right? Before. So I've done what I think is an exhaustive search on dust vocabulary in the Hebrew Bible. And there's about 10 different passages.
What is this word, dust?
Afar.
Afar. When I think of dust, I think of
the dry stuff.
A thin layer of dead skin cells on your counter.
Dust. Oh, got it. This is the dust of the Adamah.
This is mud.
Topsoil.
It's topsoil. Yeah.
Yeah. And plus, remember the stream in the previous verse.
Yeah.
So you get it's mud.
It's mud.
Mud. Yeah, the Afar. Yeah. So in the immediate context, this is when humans are exiled from the garden in Genesis 3. It's the famous line. You are dust because from it you were taken, and to the dust you will return.
Yeah.
So it becomes an image. Dust is a primary image of mortality in the Hebrew Bible. Psalm 103, verse 14. For God knows our form. He knows that we are dust. So to be made from the dust doesn't stop being true after the first human becomes a living being. He is still dust.
Yes.
And he goes back to the dust. I was born from my mom. My dad saw it happen.
Yeah.
He told me about it.
Yeah. You were there too.
Yeah. But according to Psalm 103, I am dust. I share with this being in Genesis 2 the same identity.
Yeah.
Mortal.
Right.
I am dust. Job 4, verse 19, he calls humans those who dwell in houses of clay, whose foundation is in the dust.
Yeah, our whole world is dust.
Yeah. Job 10, verse 8. Your hands, O God, fashioned me and made me. Remember that you made me as clay, and you turn me to dust again. Later in Job 33, verse 6, he says, I have been pinched out from the clay. So the point is, I think this is a narrative image of mortal humans who, without the breath of life, are just dust. Yeah. So the reason why I'm belaboring this is I think it's different Christian traditions have different concepts about the immortality. We talked about this.
Yes.
Of humans. They're just immortal, that they just live forever.
We have some immortal quality built in.
Yeah, that's right. And so I think the statement that the Eden narrative is trying to say is humans are mortal. It's only by being placed in proximity to God's eternal life that is in the garden that we can be transformed to whatever that transformation of existence is to eternal life. Yeah. So I know just for some people that's not always been clear from the text of the story. So that's why I wanted to just make that crystal clear.
Right. Now, there is a sense, even in the Hebrew Bible, of existence outside of your body.
Yeah, in Sheol.
In Sheol.
Yeah, in the underworld.
And how does that fit in?
Yeah, existence isn't the right category for it, though. It's a non-existence.
It's non-existence.
Because you don't have any volition or agency. The dead are it's just perpetual melancholy down there. And actually, the people who are down there are almost always identified as the rulers, the powers, the rulers of the earth, which I think is actually an image of the Nephilim. That's another matter. But for anyone who's optimistic about any kind of existence beyond death, it's the positive statements in the Psalms that it's the gift of God. Like at the end of Psalm 73, Psalm 49, things like that, where you will take me to yourself.
Yeah.
So it's because of God's gift, not because of any inherent immortality that I possess. It's because of God's gift. Yeah. What's challenging is to synthesize everything in the Hebrew Bible, then with statements in the New Testament, and then with philosophical clarity, and to create a theological system out of this.
That's what we want to do, is we want some sort of
That's right.
system that explains how immortal am I really as a human.
Correct, yeah. And so it's led to different conclusions in the Christian tradition. One would be that God has granted to humans the gift of, and because he sustains it, immortality. And if it's immortality in this state of whatever, new creation or heavenly bliss, then that's a gift of God. But it means that God also has to be the one sustaining the existence of people who have chosen not to participate in the new creation. But they wouldn't exist if God didn't continue to sustain them.
So he's sustaining them just to leave them out.
Correct. So that's on, again, what we're doing there is filling out implications for a theological system.
Yeah.
It's hard to hang any of that on actual passages in Scripture.
If anything, the Bible could be more clear on. you know, like, I think it's what people want a lot of clarity on.
Yeah, that's right.
Explain to me about the immortality of my being and how it all works. And because
that's right.
if I'm going to live forever, or if I'm going to live beyond even just this life, like, I want to know what's up.
Well, so the second option, or the second part of the tradition, is it's just the images of life or death. And that one's choices in the present are building a trajectory for your existence long term towards two ends, life or death. I mean, that's wisdom literature. And so this would be where the tradition, people call it an annihilationist position. If you choose a life that's on a trajectory continually away from the tree of life, then it's choosing death. Non-existence. And so there's a whole part of the Christian tradition that thinks that is actually more faithful to the biblical imagery. And then you have to take on board the image of Gehenna and what all those images represent. And there you go. It's the whole thing. But the root of it is, in the Eden narrative, it's conditional immortality. Immortality is a gift of God.
But the immortality we're talking about in the Eden narrative is like an embodied immortality.
Correct, yeah. That's
where
right.
I think where people start talking about other types of immortality, it's usually disembodied.
Oh, that's right.
Some sort of
that's right.
existence outside of your body for eternity.
That's right.
And how human soul
yeah.
is eternal in and of itself.
Correct.
Which none of that you get from Genesis 3.
You don't get any of that really in the Bible. You do have images of what for the biblical authors is a paradox, which is a human existence
outside
that's non-embodied, but that's seen as abnormal and temporary.
Yeah, not the ideal.
And non-ideal. Yeah, certainly not eternal.
So Gina's question is thought experiment, speculation. What would happen to humans if they had already eaten of the tree of life and then ate from the tree of knowing good and bad?
Yeah, which God says, boy, I can't let that happen.
That'd be a disaster.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That assumes that eating of the tree of life is like a one and done kind of thing.
Yeah, that is.
Which
it
kind
does.
of gives
that's
it
right.
the magic fruit kind of idea to it.
Yeah.
Versus what I've heard you talk about, which is it's symbolizing communion with the divine.
Yep. Proximity to God's own life.
It's like an ongoing
ingesting it.
Yeah. Feasting.
Yeah.
Not a one and done thing.
Yeah.
Tristan's been listening to this podcast and she was like making the connections to communion and like that ingesting of God's life.
Absolutely.
And for her, just the practice of communion is to come to life in
cool.
new ways, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's a famous what if.
It's a famous what if. But we do know from the narrative that God's like, these don't mix. These trees don't mix.
Yeah,
when they do, it's a disaster.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
You can only choose one. You really can only choose one of these trees.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though for us, it seems like a logical possibility.
Yeah.
Within the narrative, it's an impossibility.
Right.
Because it would be choosing life-death. You're in the state of death. It's the antithesis of life.
Yeah.
Once you've chosen the way.
And can you choose death once you've chosen life? I think it's part of that question too. Can you start like feasting on life and then be like, oh yeah, that tree.
Yeah.
Let's give that tree a shot.
You know, it's kind of an inversion of the question that people ask often in the new creation of will anybody rebel again?
Yeah.
It's actually the same question, just upside down.
There you go. It is the same question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there, the whole culmination of the biblical narrative is a humanity that through the God of the Bible becoming one with human in and through the person of Jesus, so humans can, through him, become one with their Creator. And once you have a humanity infused with the life presence of the Creator and one with him, as Jesus says in John 17, then that solves the problem. That is the solution to the problem of the human condition. And
that solution is so hard to imagine.
It is.
Because you feel like you're going to lose yourself if that happens.
That's right. In other words, the Bible paints this really particular image of the solution. And what we want to do is think through all of the inferences and implications that are unstated, but that seem to follow from it.
Sure.
And the biblical authors don't go there. And so I just think it's wise for us to recognize that when we're just speculating, that's all we're doing, speculating.
I think you can say that the new humanity would pray, bring on the test. I got this.
Consider it all joy.
It's all joy. There's no such thing as a test anymore.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for your questions.
Yeah.
We're going to continue in this series.